Welcome to Level Select, a show about games and game development. I'm your host, Fred Wood.
And I'm your host, Mike Deviar.
How's it going, Mike?
Good, I'm doing all right. You know, we're post PAX East to date this episode. Settled back in on that work grind, doing good, drinking coffee.
Yep.
A damn fine cup of coffee, if I do say so myself.
Mike held the cup up to the webcam for a second. I just have to call it out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm drinking out of a Twin Peaks coffee mug.
Yeah.
And this is, as Fred mentioned, a podcast about video games and about game development, as Fred and I are both people that somehow snuck our way into the games industry, and no one's told us to leave yet.
Yeah. It was recent that I realized, I've been doing this for a while.
You really have. Yeah, longer than I have, which also still feels like a while. So you are just like an industry veteran at this point.
That's gross. I don't like that.
But it's not wrong.
I've been in and around development for kind of a long time.
Yeah.
So these days I am doing independent development and contract development on Deltarune, whereas Mike, what are you doing these days in games?
These days, because I've done a weird mishmash of things in the games industry, both tabletop and video. But these days I am working on the development and acquisition of games to publish for the company that I work for, which is a big fancy way of saying I talk to game developers a lot and then I figure out which games that we're going to give money to publish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a pretty cool job. I really like it. It involves playing a lot of video games, so don't be surprised if I talk about some of the cooler ones I come across on this show.
Yeah, and we should talk about the goal of this show, because we did a podcast for years with our friend Levi Sutherland, and that was a mishmash of a whole bunch of just us keeping up with one another. But for this one, we want to be an outlet for people to talk about things in the industry that they're excited about, that they're passionate about. We want to have developers on to come and talk a little bit about their games, but more specifically, tell stories that wouldn't normally get told. And we want to have people on who aren't just the coders and the artists, but like we want to have the media producers. We want to have the social media managers. We want to have QA testers. Just people who have had the different experiences in the industry that really are not as covered.
Yeah, just because, I mean, talking with people and hearing their stories, something that you just naturally do a lot, either through the course of the work or going to conventions like PAX East or just any kind of mixers like that. Games development is weird.
It is.
Just across the board. It's a very weird thing. And, there's always the prevailing discussion of like, oh my God, people don't really know what really is happening when games are getting made. But like, people don't really know what's going on and what's happening when games are getting made. Sometimes those people are the people making the games.
Yeah. Totally, especially on larger projects.
Right. So there's always just a lot there to discuss and to open the doors on. And I think we're wanting to kind of not so much demystify, but share with some of the more, let's call them interesting.
We like fun stories. And also, the podcast is an excuse for us to talk to each other every week and also talk to cool people who do cool things.
Yes.
So this show is for us, and we hope it's also for you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
We don't have a guest this week.
No.
Because this is our loosey-goosey pilot.
Yeah, it also seemed really, at least for me, and I think Fred as well, it seemed really weird to go up to someone and be like, hey, we have 0 listeners. Do you want to be on our show?
I mean, we have gone up to a lot of people and said, hey, we're going to do a podcast. Will you please be on it? And we've gotten a lot of people to say yes. So
that's fair. Yeah. But I think we want to put our best foot forward first and then come back to that and not,
So this is the pilot. Not every episode is going to be us like waxing cathartic about ourselves and what we want to do. But, got to have a mission statement, I guess, up front.
Right. And that way we can direct people to episode 1 and be like, go start from the beginning.
Yeah. So, video games. That's a thing that we we make, but also it's a thing that we play. This is a bad transition.
No, it's good. No, it's good.
But I wanted to bring up the video game. This is such a bad pivot. But this week, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe came out, which is the expansion / re-release / port of the Stanley Parable, which came out in 2013, a little while ago. And it's been ported to consoles finally for the first time. Originally, it was a mod for Half-Life 2. Actually, it might have been a Half-Life 1 mod. Not sure about that.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then when it was released commercially, that was a Source Engine 2 release, which was the Half-Life 2 engine. And then this is a full port over to, or a full remake in Unity. Where they also have just really blown the heck out of it, and there's a lot more game to it. The Stanley Parable is a game where you play as a man named Stanley who has woken up in his office or is at work and realizes that all of his coworkers are gone. I'm like quoting verbatim the narrator at this point, but as Stanley moves through the office, a narrator is narrating everything Stanley does, to the point that you come to a set of doors and the narrator says, Stanley took the door on the left. At that point, you can do what the narrator said, or you can take the door on the right. And then things continue. The narrator adapts and responds to everything that you're doing. It is very funny, I think. I know that, Mike, back when you played it in 2013, it was not your jam.
Yeah, so the original game, and this is going to put it a little mildly, I struggled with it.
Yeah.
I struggled with getting into it, seeing its premise, seeing... I kind of like, I felt like I understood why it was important, but I was refusing to acknowledge why it was good. Because I think that those can be two different things for any piece of media. Because, like, for example, I think that Joel Schumacher's Batman films are important, but I don't think they're good.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Right? And so I was having that same struggle with the Stanley Parable, where it's like, I got why this was like an important watershed moment for video games, but something about the game just chafed me. And I just, and like, to say I disliked it, again, is putting it mildly. Like,
right.
I think, Fred, it's one of the few times that you and I got, like,
we got
genuinely argumentative.
I adored the Stanley Parable so much. And for you to be like, yeah, no, this isn't good. Like, just, like, really upset me in a way. And I'm excited for you to go back to it. But...
Right. So I'm actually probably going to pick this up and play this, so that when we record next time, I'll be able to come in with an opinion, because it's like, I saw the trailers for stuff and I saw some of the fun little bits that they had added, including, is the thing with the narrator voice real, or is that just...
I don't... So the thing is that every bit of marketing they put out for the game is not in the game.
Like, okay, that's really good.
They put so much work into creating like hilarious content that just has nothing to, like, is not inside the game, which is great, because like, if you spoil any aspect of this game, then you're missing out on the content. And like, the game refers to the stuff in the game as the content, and in 2022, referring to something that you put your heart and soul into as content, and like the discussion around content is so heartbreaking.
Very poignant, though.
It is so wonderfully self-aware.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm also looking forward to, because what was the second game that he'd put out?
The Beginner's Guide.
Yes. So like, while I didn't click with the Stanley Parable, I loved the Beginner's Guide. Like, I think about that game still to this day.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I'm excited to go back and retry it personally, because I literally think with the Stanley Parable at 24, 23, I like legitimately will say, I don't think I was mature enough for that game at that time.
I don't want to harp on it too much, because if you're going to check it out again, then we'll have something to talk about next time. But if you've never played the Stanley Parable, don't worry. This is the game to pick up, since it does include all of it. At the beginning, there's a little questionnaire that asks if you have played the Stanley Parable before. And if you say yes, they just show you the new content a little sooner. But otherwise, you can have the native Stanley Parable experience on its own. It's a game about the illusion of choice in video games, because anything you can do in these highly scripted games is considered by the developer.
Yeah.
So all of your choices are not meaningless, but they're not you're not the one really choosing to do this.
Well, it's the game tackles a lot with the idea of like saying free will in like a metaphysical sense. I think it's a bit too much, but it tackles with the idea of like your free will in video games. And yeah, like Fred put so poignantly, that you kind of don't actually have any, because you don't have the freedom to genuinely to do whatever you want, because this is a computer that has to do computer things.
Yeah, like it's not a procedurally generated game. This is back from a time when procedural generation was very new. Like, yeah, Minecraft was the hit new video game back when this is.
But even something like Minecraft has limits.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's I think that's where that game sits well. And again, it's why I'm interested in going back to check it out. Now that my head is pulled firmly out of my butt.
Cool. What you been playing?
I've been playing a bunch of stuff, but we're gonna lead off on a bit of a sour note, because something I put a bunch of time into and would kind of like it back has been Total War Warhammer 3, the capstone of a trilogy of games made by the Total War folks that, despite the first two games being pretty great, like genuinely very fun strategy games with like a mixture of, down in the trenches battle stuff and grand strategy elements, this game is not fun in its current state. So to get it out of the gate, the base mechanics of everything are rock solid, right? Like, they've got it all figured out. They've got it all taken care of. And the quality of life improvements are great. But the quality of content on offer feels a little anemic. And the main campaign mode that's on offer is rough in a few spots. There's a mechanic where even if you play the game perfectly, you can basically still lose just because that's what happens. And, there's nothing like playing a campaign for like 15 hours, playing it perfectly, building an empire that would make Alexander the Great weep in its magnificence. And then someone's like, yeah, but this dude got the thing a bit quicker than you did. Bye. And you're done, and that's it. And the whole thing is over. And that sucks. Especially because with the prior games, even while their sort of secondary campaign offer wasn't the best, they always had something called the Mortal Empires, which is now being called the Immortal Empires because it's got to be bigger and better. Where it was just like global grand strategy, right? Here's your little plot of land, expand, conquer, take over, etc. And you can't even really do that here, which makes it very frustrating. And again, with the nature of these games, there's just a lot there that feels unpolished, a little rushed. Like, there are things that, if you're not familiar with those games, basically all your armies from Total War Warhammer 1 carry over into Total War Warhammer 2. And then you buy the armies for Total War Warhammer 2, and then you've got the armies from 1, the armies of 2, and you've got them all to play with. Most of those armies, you don't have access to them in Total War Warhammer 3. You want to do that campaign mode, you get like the 4 armies that are new.
Oh, so it just kind of resets everything?
Right. And because that, like, the Mortal Empire stuff and some of the other stuff isn't in the game, you just don't have access to content you've already purchased outside of like small skirmish battle modes and that kind of stuff.
Was this released in like early access or something? Or
no, it's a full $60 retail game that was launched, that they are charging $60 for, and then there's going to be DLC, which costs $20 for new armies, because that's how much new armies cost. And the game feels like the best way I can describe it is that it feels like when Street Fighter V first came out.
Oh, yeah.
We have a great skeleton of a video game, but I don't think it's going to be a full video game until like a year or two from now.
Or longer in Street Fighter's case.
Right. And
although,
it's a bummer.
I mean, Street Fighter V now, kicks ass.
Street Fighter V now is incredible, right? And that's why I'm hopeful that down the line the game gets better. I was a latecomer to the Total War Warhammer games. So from what I understand, I think Total War Warhammer 2 kind of had a similar rocky start. So I am confident that the game is going to get there. And especially to use the Street Fighter V reference, I think Street Fighter V now is probably the second best Street Fighter game ever, in my opinion. I know everyone's going to have their fighting game opinions. Super Turbo, Alpha 2.
What's your favorite?
Third Strike. Street Fighter 3 Third Strike is that's my measuring stick. But yeah, it's like I think 5 it has genuinely turned out at the end of its lifespan to be a very fantastic game. And I'm hoping that for Total War Warhammer 3, because like what's there is really fun. And if you like strategy games, it's a blast. But there's not enough of it. And if someone was like, oh, I'm going to get into these games, what should I get? I would be like, just buy the first 2.
Yeah.
And then wait until 3 is like either on sale or like a year from now.
I see.
Because right now it seems like it's worth $40 and not 60.
Man, I feel real bad. So one of the things I really want to do with this podcast is talk about things that we're really positive about, right?
Yes.
And like, we can't always be. And I understand that that's the case with Total War Warhammer 3. It also is the case with what I wanted to talk about next, which is Halo Infinite Season 2.
Oh, no.
Man, like, Halo Infinite is a phenomenal video game. The campaign, while the story itself is a bit dumb, it is some of the most fun in a first-person shooter I've had.
Yeah.
And Halo Infinite Season 2 realistically is just the multiplayer update, right? They did take out some of the fun stuff in the campaign. They recently removed some speedrun tricks.
Why?
I don't know. Like, they removed this, like, very overpowered glitch gun in the game, which I can kind of understand if you're trying to get players to play through the Legendary campaign or the Lasso campaign, where it's incredibly difficult and you get some sort of reward at the end of it, then, like, sure, you don't want to make it too easy. There is no reward for beating the game on Legendary, though. So, I mean, there's a slightly different ending that doesn't have enough context to be interesting.
Okay.
But so they took the fun, well, some of the fun. There's still tons and tons of fun to be had in Halo Infinite's campaign, but they took some of that out. And for the multiplayer, they added 2 new maps, and they're cool. Like, one of them is incredibly cool, I think. It's a Forerunner-based level, which we just didn't have much of any in the multiplayer so far. And then they added a couple of new modes, including one that is a very, very loose concept of a battle royale, where I think it's 32 players. It might not be that many, but it's like 32 players. It's last Spartan standing. You have 5 lives. And everybody starts with just a pistol, and as you kill other Spartans, you get points, and that levels up your character. And then once you've died 5 times, then you're out. And that mode is like cool, and it's interesting. It's unbalanced like hell right now, and it's very strange.
How, if you don't mind me asking, how does that work with because like Halo maps, especially some of the ones in Infinite, and I don't think this is bad, they're cramped levels.
Yeah,
though.
The one that they stuck it on is pretty big.
Okay.
I haven't spent enough time with it to actually even know the breadth of that map.
Yeah.
But it feels pretty dang big. It's cool, but one of the problems with Halo Infinite in Season 1 is a lot of the time that the game was hot, Big Team Battle wasn't working properly, which was the 12-on-12 multiplayer mode, which I was playing with a group of friends that we would frequently have more than 4 people who wanted to play.
Right.
And if we wanted to play together, we would have to play the Big Team Battle mode. And so when that didn't work, we all stopped kind of playing Halo. Now with Season 2 is here, we want to play again together, and there's a new battle pass, which is fun to fill out. You like seeing the numbers go up, you like unlocking stuff, but they started it with this event, this Last Spartan Standing mode, which is very cool, that is single player only. Like, you can't go in with a team. So
can you go in with like a lobby of your friends and then
no, because it's, like everybody's trying to win, you'd have people teaming up to take out everybody else and then I guess cheat your way through, right? Like, I understand why it's single player only, but this is something that affects me and my group of friends, but it doesn't necessarily affect the majority of like serious Halo players. Maybe they want to go in and play it alone, but their big event makes me not. It keeps me from going in and playing with my friends, which is
right. And what I was going to say is that I would assume from a casual perspective. I don't mean that as like a derogatory, and I know it can come off as one, but like from casual gameplay perspective, you just want to sit down and play with your friends, not really having a lot of options to do that is a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, so Big Team Battle works now, and there is new content for that. So like the King of the Hill, which has been in since Halo 1, they finally put that into Halo Infinite. Talking about incomplete, a lot of things are missing in Halo Infinite that they're slowly putting in. And if you take a look at Master Chief Collection, which I think also came out in 2013, 2014, like that game was a mess when it came out.
Right.
Now it is the perfect way to revisit all of the Halo games except for Halo 5. And I think that given time, Halo Infinite will get to the place that it will eventually be. I mean, that obviously. But like, I think it'll be a fantastic game when it's done. But like right now, you don't have the user-generated Forge mode. You don't have co-op either online or offline yet. And these are things they're working on, and they'll get in there. But like, this is a game that was supposed to launch with the Xbox Series S and Series X, and they delayed it about a month before it was supposed to come out, a full year. And so for that full year, you'd think that, okay, well, they're going to nail it at the gate. And while the game that came out last November was an absolute blast, it was incomplete. And here we are in May of 2022, and it's still incomplete. And of course the TV show's happening, and that's just souring me on the Halo fandom as well. Or not fandom, but the franchise. Like it's a rough time to be a Halo fan.
I was gonna say, and for people that might not know who Fred and I are, Fred being soured on the Halo franchise is like, that's a big deal.
I mean, it isn't like Halo 5 came out and I was pretty sour, but Halo Infinite came out and I was on cloud 9.
Right. But I was gonna say, like, this franchise has kind of been your ride or die since the first game, yeah?
I mean, this and Sonic, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's what I mean. It's like, this is rough.
Yeah, I adore Halo, and it feels like everything they're doing at the moment is really making me not happy to be a Halo fan, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I think they'll get it right, but this franchise is treating me wrong right now. On the subject of franchises that we adore treating us right, we'll move on to the next one.
Talking about games that have tons of content out of the gate.
Also a game that we can both talk about because we've both engaged with it.
Yeah, so I've been on my second playthrough of Elden Ring, which is a game I don't think I have stopped playing since it launched in late February. Man, this is a bit hyperbolic, but like every open world game now has to live up to this level, I think. While I'm not going to make like super declarative statements about like Western open world games versus like the way that games like Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring have handled them, because obviously they're achieving very different things. There's just something about playing Elden Ring that is just like, for me personally, my ideal video game. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. But the fact that this game came out was as packed to the gills with content as it is. And then with like the concurrent patches, they have apparently just added more content.
That is the thing that has surprised me the most about Elden Ring, is that like every time a patch comes out, they're like, hey, there's more quest steps now. Now the NPCs do more stuff. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was like, they were already doing a bunch.
Yeah.
They were already doing tons of stuff.
I mean, this is a game that like every time I was close to being done with it for a night, I'd be like, all right, well, I'll just go this direction for a bit. It's like, oh, I'm underground. Oh, I'm so far underground that it has a sky again. Oh, this game's amazing.
Right. And it's one of those things where for me, I just remember having a moment where I was in that one of those underground segments. I had just gotten there. I'm looking up at this purple sky with these glittering stars and just being like, yeah, video games. Yeah, and just like it conjured a feeling in me in the same way that like playing Devil May Cry 3 for the first time did, or playing just like a lot of games that I really adore for the first time. where I was just like, man, video games rule. This is what it's about. Just doing cool, like beating Halo 3 on Legendary with my friend for the first time, like just stuff like that where you're just swept up in the moment. But the game's also really dumb at points, which I also love. And I think that there needs to be a conversation about games and their silly imperfections and how sometimes that's a good thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Because there's something about killing an enemy, watching them ragdoll to the ground, and then for some reason, maybe they hit the ledge the wrong way. Maybe they had a physics issue with the barrel they touched. Maybe the stairs just weren't agreeing with them, or your body was in the way. But watching that little body freak out and then shoot off into the sky, don't fix it. Don't fix that. Like, stuff like that, I love it, because it's one of those, like, oh yeah, games are made by humans.
Yeah.
How far have you gotten into the game? Because I know you were having some struggles with the way the difficulty just spikes.
So where I am in the game now is where I think I'm done. I think I adore the game, and I don't think I'm going to finish it. But I got to the Draconic Sentinel, which kept me outside of... Landell. And then I was going down Rainey's quest and am stuck at the 2 gargoyles.
Yes.
The one giant gargoyle thing I'm fighting, and then all of a sudden another one with like 2 swords comes out and is just like, hey, you know how you were struggling? You're done.
Yeah.
And I'm playing it completely single player offline because I wanted to play the game at a higher frame rate with ultra widescreen.
So that's like a you thing specifically.
It's totally a me thing, and I also wanted to feel like I could beat the game on its own terms.
Sure, which I will say, the fact that you are, because we've beaten Dark Souls together, we've played Demon Souls together. I will say the fact that you have gotten this far on your own with no help is a testament, because as someone who has played all of the suite of Hidetaka Miyazaki games from the beginning, this game is brutal.
Totally. But at the same time, like, this is the most approachable a Souls game has ever been, because if you run into a wall that you can't climb...
You can just hit the bricks, go over there.
Yeah, just go somewhere else. Find something else for a bit. And while I cannot beat these 2 bosses, like, in these very wildly differing paths, every time I feel like logging in, I can just kind of go off in another direction and have another adventure for a little bit. And so I love it for that reason. But I think the thing that actually killed my Elden Ring run is the next game I wanted to talk about, which is Tunic.
Yeah.
Which is a game published by Finji that is primarily made by one person with a lot of help, but like primarily made by one person. It looks like a Zelda game from screenshots. Playing it feels like a Souls game. In terms of combat, it is locking on, managing stamina, dodge rolling, shields, incredibly challenging bosses. And then what it really is a series of MacGuffin hunting and then crazy meta learning experiences. Tunic is my game of the year so far.
Yeah, you had mentioned that before in a conversation, and I guess I just want to ask, and because I haven't played Tunic yet, it's on my list of things like Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe to check out soon. I guess, what about this game's gameplay, what it's doing, like what about it distills it into the thing that it is for you? Because I've heard a ton of buzz, but every time I've asked, no one's really like illuminated me.
The reason that no one can really illuminate you is because if they do, I think that they are spoiling the game in a way that kind of might ruin it for you.
Okay.
The game teaches you how to play it in such interesting ways. Like I said, it seems like a Zelda game, and then it seems like a Souls game, but it's actually like more than those things. And it's and not in like some grand way, but like the moment to moment learning different things, like even the upgrade system or something, like is something that like you learn kind of naturally while playing the game. And I hate to even say that much, because the feeling of discovery in that game hit with me even stronger than it did in Elden Ring,
which is a game built on that dopamine hit of, oh, what's this?
The cool thing about Tunic is that it's on Game Pass.
Yeah, which this is going to be probably what I imagine is one of dozens of free advertisements for the Game Pass that we're going to give over
the best deal in video games.
If you don't have it, it's $10, y'all. Like, Fred had to drag me over into getting one for like years, but then I did.
There's like, you can also go and buy like 3 years of Xbox Live on the cheap, and then pay $1 to upgrade that. Like, and this is an exploit that has existed since the beginning of Game Pass, and they're just like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
And you also get games like The Good Life on there, which is another fantastic game.
I need to play that.
We'll talk about it. Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a game that needs to be played. Like, also, I was talking to Ryan Schott, our friend, who was saying like this game might not like. I think that if some people bought this game expecting to go into it thinking one thing about it, there are a lot of people who would have been immediately turned off and refunded that game.
Right. Well, because my initial thing going into it was just that I was going to play a cute little Zelda game with a little fox boy, and then
it's also hard as hell sometimes.
Right. And then I started seeing stuff like that, and then I started seeing some of the puzzle things, and then again the general conversation around it, and I was like, oh, this is different.
The puzzle also seems insurmountable when you first when you discover some of the puzzle of the game. You're like, oh, I'm going to need to go find like a tutorial online to just get past this point. But it's super accessible. The way you learn in that game is by reading the instruction manual. And the instruction manual is not written in any normal language. Like, you can't just read it. So you're looking at pictures and you're piecing together through context of like what's on the pages, what it's trying to teach you. And then when you get to the final puzzle, like, the only hint I will give anybody is it is all in the instruction manual. So
that's fun.
Find the pages of the instruction manual in the game, and you'll find everything.
Yeah. Okay. That's neat.
Let's talk about the last game / pair of games.
Yeah. So again, for people who are new to the show, I'm going to apologize. I love From Software games. Love them. And not even just the recent ones. I love Armored Core. I love, I just love their games. Like, I'm blanking on a couple. 3D Dot Game Heroes. I think that's a game that was super underrated from that generation. I love weird, ambitious jank. If your game has a lot of ambition, but is a little crusty, chances are you've got a fan and a patron in me. So I'm going to talk about the game, the From Software game first, and then segue that into a game I've been recently playing. I checked out Kingsfield 4 about a year ago when I was working as an editor for an indie gaming mag, and because I wanted to know like where not just the Souls games came from, but like I never checked out that series because it always just seemed a little too bad to play.
Sure, yeah,
because they're not elegant games, right? Like the controls are weird. You're like using the shoulder buttons to look up and down and turn because the last Kingsfield game I think came out before the first Halo game. So we're in a pre-twin stick supremacy movement world.
That was on PS2 though, right? It was
yes, yeah, early 2001 on the PS2, and then the other Kingsfield games were all on PlayStation. But I eventually fell in love with it and found Kingsfield 4 genuinely to be a game that is not just like good, but I think overlooked for how genius its level design is and how it manages to tell very little story, but have a very engaging story just by the nature of the player going through their adventure. And so even though I'm playing all these Souls games and Elden Ring, I wanted something a bit more like Kingsfield. And so I've been looking and playing games and not really hitting that same oomph until I came across a game called Lunacid, which is a game in early access on Steam right now, which is being designed in that similar vein to old school From Software dungeon crawlers like Kingsfield, Shadow Tower.
Yeah, they say straight up on the Steam store page.
Yeah, they are, and they are making no bones about it. Like they are.
Yeah, Lunacid is a first-person dungeon crawler inspired by old FromSoft games like Shadow Tower and Kingsfield.
Yeah, it is right what it says on the tin. which for me has been really great. Like the game, obviously it's in early access, so it's not like 100% perfect. And there are certain things about it that don't quite capture that same vein. But the fact that even someone is going for it and trying to keep that spirit alive has been really fun. And I'm pretty early on into the game still, but I'm already enjoying what I'm playing of it. And I will probably check in on this once I've completed what's available, probably next week, to give a little update. But yeah, it's just a game that like clearly is a passion project, is a little rough around the edges, but still has those same things of like, wanting to be a little bit more dangerous, wanting to be a little bit more engaging with making the player kind of have to think like, okay, well, I can skirt this enemy. So like, it's going to be a bit more worth it than going in because I've got 2 healing items and half of my health. And I don't know when I'm going to find more healing items because I don't have a healing spell. So, making those choices, I think for me is something that's very important in dungeon crawlers and something that is lost in a lot of similar games, not just in modern From Software games, but I feel like a lot of fantasy games don't give you that sense of, oh god, I'm like deep in this dungeon. I'm low on resources, but going back is way more frustrating than continuing to go forward. And that's something that both Kingsfield 4 and Lunacid have both provided, is that sense of chances are there's going to be something worthwhile ahead, but also like sometimes you might find a huge monster that's going to beat the crap out of you. And, and that was, you made the bad choice, but like, that's fun.
So the controls, are they better?
And Lunacid, absolutely. Yeah. Lunacid's controls are much more modernized, have a much more modern UI and setup. It's not nearly as esoteric as both the Kingsfield games and just certain From Software conventions get. Like, they kind of finally figured out by like Sekiro and Elden Ring how to like be like, here's how things work. But it was a long road to get there. So yeah, I think Lunacid's definitely worth checking out.
And it's also $7.
Right. Like, and that's kind of why I just dove into it. Like, this game is absolutely worth the $7 in its current state. And if it keeps at that price point going forward, then I think it's going to be a genuinely good steal and one of those sort of little indie sleeper titles that I'm going to keep coming back to. Speaking of things worth checking out, how about the news?
I guess. So I wanted to say, we talked about a lot of games this week. We don't normally play this many games per week. We probably won't take as long as we did this time, but we don't have a guest on this week. So
yeah,
you're here with us. So there are a million podcasts out there doing the news. So we're not going to just bloviate on about the news, but this one was worth touching on. Square Enix sold their US developers and a number of their IPs to the Embracer Group. They sold specifically Eidos and Crystal Dynamics, both companies that have been the whipping boy for times when games didn't sell particularly well. And they sold it for an obscenely low $300 million.
So I do want to say... the fact that that's obscene, like, I get it, and
I agree. Low when we look at the context of...
But I keep people saying, like, oh, that's so low. I'm like, man, if I had $300 million...
Sure, yeah, of course. We'll get into that in one of the questions that I see down there, too.
Yeah. But these are companies with franchises that include stuff like Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief... Which, like, Thief and the Legacy of Kain aren't exactly hot IPs right now.
Sure, but, like, Tomb Raider, like, they just announced a new Tomb Raider.
Right. And, like, people are always clamoring for Deus Ex. And also, it also included Crystal Dynamics' hottest title and savior of gaming, Gex.
Right. No. Yeah, no. I just want to point out, though, like, they got 1,100 staff members, 50 back titles, a number of IPs... for $300 million.
Yeah.
PlayStation is acquiring Bungie for $3.6 billion, and they have Destiny. They don't have Halo. They've got Marathon, which no one has asked for a new Marathon game outside of me in the last 20 years.
And me.
Myth, half of the Rockstar published Oni, and Pathways into Darkness. So I'm just saying, like, $3.6 billion for Bungie versus 2 studios and a history of games.
I guess the thing I'm going to say, and this is going to sound a little cynical, how much money and revenue has Destiny generated versus how much money and revenue have these studios and their collective IPs generated?
I'm going to say probably not 10 times as much, but
Sure.
maybe. But also, like, getting that much IP for 300 million.
Oh, it's wild. Yeah, like,
I'm surprised Microsoft didn't, like, swoop in and buy Tomb Raider for 300 million by itself.
and just hang on to it.
So the IPs that they explicitly stated in the transaction were Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief, and Legacy of Kain. Those are 2 heavy hitters, and then 2 that I love.
Yeah, and two legacy hitters that
Yeah.
I think if Amy Hennig was brought back on board.
Oh, she's making a Star Wars game now. So
Yeah, she's making a Star Wars game right now. Like, yeah, get that bag, Amy. Like, but if they got her back for a Legacy of Kain game, like, I think people would show up.
sure. I think a Legacy of Kain game that isn't Nosgoth, a weird online-only multiplayer game, like if they did a new Soul Reaver game, or if they remade one of the Soul Reaver games, like they're going to make their money back.
Yeah.
I was looking through the Wikipedia pages of games that were published. And so Square Enix still retains some of the projects that these companies have worked on, including Life is Strange, Just Cause, and Outriders. They let go of Tomb Raider, but they held on to Outriders. So
Super
cool,
weird.
I guess. But so Gex is an IP of some value. I don't know how much value, but some value.
People love the Gecko.
Whiplash, which is a beloved PS1 game. The Pandemonium games, which are beloved PS1 games. The Eidos published games were the ones that are kind of wild. They published a lot of games, and I don't know how much ownership they have over those IPs or anything, but like Fear Effect. Mm-hmm. Like that's a really big one, I think.
I mean, I think for the era, I don't know how many people nowadays are clinging on to.
I bet a new Fear Effect game would sell well, and I bet re-releasing the Fear Effect games would sell well. There's also the Fighting Force series, which I absolutely love.
I don't know that I ever played them.
They were 3D Streets of Rage.
Okay.
In fact, I think they had some of the folks that worked on Streets of Rage move on to Fighting Force.
Interesting.
Like it might have been a failed Dreamcast game. I'm not sure.
I mean, most things were failed Dreamcast games, but
The best video games are all failed Dreamcast games. Yeah. Omicron the Nomad Soul is a game
I have played.
Project Eden Time Splitters, and this is just one that came up recently in a conversation about how Way of the Samurai 1 never got re-released because rights were held up in a weird place.
I mean, I don't think Way of the Samurai 2 has gotten a re-release either, has it?
No, but that was published by Capcom.
Right.
So this one was published by Eidos. Embracer Group is like real big on re-releasing games from their catalog. I would love to see a re-release of Way of the Samurai 1 on PC.
If I could get those first 2 games on PC.
You mean by purchasing them from a store, not by playing them? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like a legitimate, because I own Way of the Samurai 2 still. Like, I've got a PS2.
Yeah, me too.
Boot it up semi-regularly still. Sure. I love that game. Again, ambitious jank is the terms I would use for it, but no, it's wild.
I'm just saying 300 million seems like a pretty good deal for that many games.
Yeah, it's also off the backs of what I've heard is the very good Guardians of the Galaxy game.
Yeah.
That came out that was apparently dubbed a failure for not selling.
I had heard a story a while back that like the way that Square Enix does their games is that each game that sells is supposed to finance the next game. Like it's supposed to pay for itself and pay for the next game.
Interesting. Okay.
And so every time a game would come out of the West and sell pretty well, it would still be deemed a failure.
Because it wasn't achieving those lofty heights.
The one headline I keep seeing is based on like a line from Square Enix saying that they they did this transaction to pay for a number of different endeavors, one of which is crypto BS.
Okay.
And like, I think that that's more of an investor line than an actual line of desire.
Yeah.
Because crypto is still hot with investors. So saying, hey, we sold this to make a bunch of money to invest in the future of BS. Like, I don't think that these Western studios got sold for that reason.
No.
If I were to guess, I would say they sold the Western development or division so that way they could maybe be freed up to be purchased for a larger sum by a another company.
I could see that. I'm also getting shades of when Capcom shut down a lot of their Western stuff.
Yeah.
And just really started and just started really zeroing back in on sort of like their quote core values, for lack of a better term. I could see that, but like with all the rumor and innuendo of both those companies getting bought out by, bigger entities, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that because there's like this part of me that's like, oh, it's probably nothing, but
it's probably nothing. And I hope that they stay their form of independent. Like,
yeah, I think that's for the best.
All of the mergers and acquisitions that are going on, like, is not necessarily great for the industry. It's fun for fans to some extent,
but it's a weird state. Because I remember, there's the rumor and innuendo that Sony was buying FromSoft, and I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Kadokawa is going to let go of a game that just sold 12 million units in 17 days.
Right.
Like, I think they're looking at that money and going, well, this is pretty sick, actually.
We should sell more of this.
Right. But, it does come to a point where it's like, if Sony and Microsoft, and I guess also Nintendo, buy all these companies, that's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. I'm hoping that they don't get acquired, just because outside of Bungie, all of the acquisitions have been towards kind of pigeonholing all of these studios.
Right.
Activision games moving forward, except for some of the biggest ones, will probably all be Xbox exclusives, which thankfully Microsoft puts their stuff on Windows because they own it. But like, if PlayStation buys it, then that means that they put it on their $500 box, which is almost impossible for people to buy. So that's less fun for the whole of gamers, but is great for PlayStation owners.
Yeah.
So I just, and also like, when you work for a big company, you don't have the kind of freedoms that you do when you're smaller. Not to say that Square Enix is any kind of small, but...
No, yeah. But I get what you're saying. Like, there's a certain level of freedom that I think those companies would be afforded that otherwise they may not be if, like, a game comes out that's, like, very experimental and it doesn't sell well, and suddenly someone's going, well, hey, don't do that ever again.
Right.
Because what developers are, what the people at those companies are probably going to hear is, don't experiment ever again. Just do what games sold well. Which may not be what's being actually said, but like those interpretations, we see those kinds of interpretations all the time in the industry. This has gotten really dour.
Yeah. Well, we'll kick it up a notch. But first, we should probably take a quick break.
Yeah.
All right, so next we've got some questions from the audience, which is, I guess, not true, right? Because no one's ever listened to the show before.
People that we asked very kindly on the internet.
Yeah, we posted on the internet to send us questions to the places where you can send questions for the show.
Yeah.
Which you can do by visiting levelselect.cool. You can go to our Discord, or you can send emails to mail@levelselect.cool. Make sure that you give us the name that you want read on there, or if you want to be anonymous, make sure that you mention that. You want to take the first one?
Yeah, so our first question comes from Nick, who asks, Sega has tasked you with making a third game in their new Super Game Initiative after Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio. You have been given $100 million and a directive to make a Big the Cat game. What is the game about, and what is it called?
I mean, so Big the Cat is just about fishing, right? Like all the big...
I mean, in Sonic Adventure 1, Big the Cat is about fishing. In Sonic Adventure 2, he's mostly in prison.
Yeah, or being crushed by a truck in the background.
Right.
So we have 1/3 of Crystal Dynamics and Eidos's budget.
Yeah.
We could buy 2/3 of one of those companies. I think that's how that math works.
Do you want to hear what my idea is? Because I've got an idea. I got an idea real quick after reading this question.
For it.
So my idea, the game is called Big's Day Out.
Okay.
And it's just about what Big is doing during the events of Sonic Adventure 2.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just like he's trying to have like a very normal day, and it's just about the cascading series of increasingly absurd events during Sonic Adventure 2's gameplay. So you only ever you see the truck from City Escape, and Big gets smashed by it, and he goes up and he maybe like breaks some dude's building down, so that's why he's in prison. It's just like him bumbling his way through, as the player has to go through these like puzzle challenges using Big skills as a fisherman to get him out of trouble. Probably at one point, what's the fish's name? Sorry, not the fish. Froggy gets captured, so he has to go and rescue Froggy. But it's just Big's big bumbling idiot adventure.
Yeah, Big's day out. So the thing is that it has to be part of the Super Game Initiative, which is Sega's new big scale live service game.
Right. So, subtitle Sonic Adventure 3.
Well, no. Like, let's not get that stink on it. Let's make it an episodic title.
Because those do great today.
Yeah, no, that's great. An episodic title where like each season is a new section of the Sonic Adventure 2 story. Mm-hmm. So it's something that is told over the course of 10 years. And granted, $100 million is just to get the first couple episodes done. Right. And then the Battle Pass...
Once the game sells 17 million copies in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Then we can continue.
Right. No, of course.
Yeah. I think that's perfect, yeah. Knocked it out of the park. Next question comes from Emilio. Hey dudes, a question for Mike in particular. Now that both the remake and Elden Ring are out, I'm guessing Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Do you still consider Demon Souls your favorite / the one Souls game you most go back to of them all?
Yeah, so I've actually been grappling with this a lot because...
Grappling sounds so dramatic, Mike.
No, but it is, because it's like... It's something that I cannot state enough, that part of the reason why I'm even sat here today is because of Demon Souls. Because I almost stopped playing video games before I started playing Demon Souls, because I was just... nothing was really grabbing me anymore. And so that game has been my favorite game for a decade now, over a decade now. And Elden Ring, I think, might be my new favorite game.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's hard to tell right now.
You got that recency bias, but at the same time,
there's a recency bias, but there's also a bias I have towards Demon Souls because I've got literal thousands of hours in that game. And while I chafed a bit with some of the decisions with the remake is still a fantastic adaptation of that game. But I think it stands to a bigger thing of like, what happens when a game that was like a landmark moment in your life or a landmark influence on your career path gets replaced.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever had that experience before where you've just played something and you're like, oh, my favorite's different now. Like, this is like something that I've hung my hat on.
I wish I had a good answer for this, but like, my favorite game has shifted so many times. There are so many more incredible games are coming out more and more. Mm-hmm. For the longest time, it was Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and then it was Shadow of the Colossus, which quickly got usurped by Halo 3. Like, and all of these games are still some of the best video games ever made, I think.
Oh, yeah.
All of them with their flaws, especially with time, with hindsight. Like, they're all still fantastic, but I've never had a game that was as important to me, I think, as Demon Souls was to you.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you feel more fondly or less fondly due to the remake of Demon Souls?
So I struggled with some of the purely visual changes made with the Demon Souls remake.
I can relate to that with the Shadow of the Colossus remake.
Right.
Like, which is definitely a better version of that game, but it doesn't look like I want it to.
Right. I was one of those super huge weirdos that was like, oh yeah, just take Demon Souls from 2009, 2010, upscale the, like I would have been fine with the low poly stuff and just upscale the tech, like they could have done that. And I would be like, yeah, this is a great PS5 game, which I understand is insane.
Probably wouldn't sell PS5.
No.
I mean, it would sell a couple.
It would have
PS5s,
sold a PS5 to me and 100 other people, and there would be warehouses full of them. But no, I still look very fondly on Demon Souls. The original, even the remake, but Elden Ring captures for me that same feeling that I got playing Demon Souls. The soaring joys, the frustrations, the me complaining that this is designed bad and blah, 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 blah. And then on my second playthrough, I'm like, no, I just sucked and needed to pay attention and like engage with the game on its own terms. Yeah, so it's like Demon Souls, I think, is going to be a game that always bears a special place for me. Same thing with like Baldur's Gate 2, Devil May Cry 3, which I mentioned earlier, and and a bevy of other games. Like Demon Souls is the next in that line. I just think Elden Ring for me was like, for me, it is my like platonic ideal of a video, right? Like this is like,
no, I get you.
That is my platonic ideal of what a video game should be. So yeah, I don't think it's going to ever really be supplanted in that regard, but I don't know that I'm going to go back to it as often as I do now, because now I've got a little yak horse I can ride named Torrent.
Yeah.
Sentimentality on our podcast. Expect a lot of that, but yeah. Our next question comes from Mark Lentz of Chuhai Labs, and he writes, longtime listener, first-time questioner. If you could make any game that has already been made, but totally take the credit for having made it, what would it be? Why would it be Duke Nukem 3D? Correct answers only.
So
it's gotta be Duke Nukem 3D, right?
It's gotta be Duke Nukem 3D by definition, but like, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the wrong answer for me anyways.
Like in a very, like, not...
Yeah, no, I mean, like, Duke Nukem 3D holds this, like, I hate answering this. It holds this really special place in my heart because it was kind of where I got my start in game development, because I used to make mods and maps for Duke Nukem 3D Atomic Edition in the build engine.
Oh my god.
Like it like that game doesn't hold up, and I don't want that to be my answer, but I am bound by the contract of the question asker. So, yeah.
Yeah, no,
I would love to take credit for making most of Duke Nukem 3D.
Right, no, same. Well, especially because, like, and this is a weird segue, but we're in this, like, weird revival of people making, like, games in old engines.
Yeah.
Like, you see people making games in, like, Doom engine, like, in, like, the old Doom engines, and you see people using, like, the, build engine to make stuff. So it's like, yeah, Duke Nukem, like, unironically.
Man, this is not my story to tell, but I would love to have Nigel Lowry, the head of Devolver Digital, on sometime so he could tell the world what he told me about his idea for a Duke Nukem origin story. Like, full-fledged video game that he wanted to make.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. No, always bet on Duke. Crash Curves writes in, hey guys, love to hear you on a podcast again. Have you been wanting to return to podcast for a long time, or did you like having a bit of distance and working on your own endeavors in the meantime?
I missed it. I enjoyed doing podcasts.
Yeah, I missed the hell out of it.
Yeah, I enjoy doing podcasts with you. I'm still working on my own endeavors. Like, I don't think either of us are the kind of people that do well with sitting around doing nothing for extended periods of time.
Yeah. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Like, we still have our show that we want to do with Levi someday, but like, the reason that fell apart was that like 3 adults with very different jobs rarely have time that lines up.
Yeah.
Thankfully, like this one with the 2 of us, we can. I mean, this is the first episode. We'll see. But it seems like it seems like we've got a plan and a schedule that works for it. That said, like, last year I had 3 jobs that took up all of my time.
Right.
This year I have 1. So now I can do a podcast. For fun. This is for fun.
As it should be.
It's great to be back. One thing is that I have been working on games for some years now. And all of those games are something that I work every day on for many, many hours. And then I don't get to talk about them at all until they're out. And then when they come out, I get to be very excited about it. And I will continue telling everybody, hey, here's this cool thing I worked on. But people will only care for a very short period of time after it comes out. Like, being able to make something that I get to shove in people's face every week is a very exciting forward-facing opportunity for me. And that's what this podcast is.
It's also, again, I mentioned dopamine hits earlier.
Yeah.
There's something real nice about being like, oh, it's done, it's out.
It's done, it's out. It only took us a couple hours.
Go check it out. Now I can turn around and stare at the thing I've been working on for the past, like, year and a half that I'm, like, halfway done with and go...
Straight back to work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, or, like, the stuff I'm working on for my day job, which is, like, stuff I can't really talk about all that much.
Yeah.
Because as the nature of video games go, non-disclosure agreements are everywhere.
Yep.
So.
Yep. But yeah, it is just so good to have something that I can talk about. And so now when I'm talking to people for the first time, I'm like, oh yeah, I do. I'm a game developer. I work on Deltarune. I can't talk about that, but what I can talk about is my podcast. Like,
yeah.
I get to be that asshole at every party now.
And then for me, now when people ask, like, oh, so you work in games? I'm like, yeah. And then you go, what do you do? I can just go, oh, I podcast. Because it's way, like, which is not at all my job, but it's like, you know, when you've got a very winding road through video games like I've had, it's like, okay, so I did this and then I did that, and now I'm doing this, but on the side, Yeah. Everyone's journey is different, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about, and I'm excited to talk about it with folks.
And speaking of journeys, I believe this is the end for this episode of Level Select.
A podcast about the game journey.
That sucks. So normally I would have a thing written up. Crap.
Yeah, I was looking
for the part
it.
Okay. So here are the bullet points. Levelselect.cool is where you can find everything about the game. Damn it.
Levelselect.cool
is where you can find everything about the podcast, as well as links to everything that we do and ways to get in touch with us. We have a Discord, which is still very much under construction, but like, come hang out, talk to us about the things you're passionate about. And if you know somebody in the industry who has a cool story to tell, let us know. Like, there's so many stories worth telling. And if you find us on Apple Podcasts or anything that takes reviews, leave a review if you want. Only if it's nice, though. If it's not, maybe move on.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Thanks to Toby Fox for composing the intro and outro for our podcast.
Which is wild. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll try to find a way to put that up in its entirety sometime for y'all. Yeah, I guess that's going to do it. We've just been so bad at sign-offs in the past, and we don't have one today.
Yep.
So, how do you do this?
You wait 3 days and then you call them back.
I don't know what that means.
Because we're like, this is like it's like a first date with this podcast.
Oh, right, yeah. So,
don't, fill the vibes. Have a good day. Drink some water.
Get some sleep.
Tell somebody you love them.
Hey, I love you.
I love you.
I was talking to the listener, but I love you too, Mike.
Oh. Let's try this again next week, and maybe we'll have something to talk about at the end.
I guarantee we won't. But see you next week, guys.
Bye.
Welcome to Level Select, a show about games and game development. I'm your host, Fred Wood, and
I'm your co-host,
hold on.
Mike
Sorry,
Deviar.
I f***ed that one up.
No.
I just continued to read it. No, it has to be good.
You're about to be both of us.
I was about to be both of us, and yes. Welcome to Level Select. Welcome to Level Select. Welcome to...
Oh my God. Stop. Welcome to Level Select.
No.
Oh my God. No, now you've got me f***ed up.
Yeah, all right.
Welcome to Level Select, a show about games and games development. I'm your host, Mike Deviar.
No, I'm doing it.
Oh my God. I just gave you the perfect take.
I know. Okay.